Let's talk to Phil now, and I'm very pleased to have Phil with us today. Phil is an experienced mortgage banker. He's currently Chief Production Officer for Paramount Residential Mortgage Group, and Paramount is a national player based out in California. Phil's been previously with Wells and Countrywide. He started business. He's managed his sales staff. He's done just a fantastic job in all these positions. And we really appreciate Phil sharing his expertise today. Phil, why don't you talk a little bit about, in your experience, when you're managing top producers, what are some of the early warning signs that you see and what people really could be looking for?
Well, first and foremost, Pat, let me say thank you for having me on your show today. I love your slides. They're absolutely spot on. You know, some of the early warning signs, some of the things that we have seen, that I've seen over time is, you know, it's not magical. It's not rocket science. If you're close to your top producers, you're going to know something's up. But let's just say that you're not that close. You're at a distance. You know, what you're going to see is you're going to see that their credit reports are up. They're not submitting loans. The production is dropping. There's a drop in communication, but before there's a drop in communication, they're talking to you and they're giving you a verbal warning. They're basically telling you they have verbal frustration. And if it's ignored or just said, I'll look into it, let me see what I can do, eventually it turns into apathy and they become invisible. So if you've got top producers that were talking to you and they're not talking to you anymore, you might want to do what you suggested, call them in for an interview. And here's one warning sign. Here's one that maybe not many people can see or feel, is that when they walk into your office and they don't give you eye contact.
Yeah, that's really a good point. I thought it's really interesting when you're saying about them not talking to you. Talk a little bit more about that. In other words, especially with so many changes that are in the business, you know, what is it that, you know, what do you see going on currently when they stop the talking? Like, in other words, they're not really interested in changes because they kind of given up. Is that really what you're saying?
Yeah, I think what's happened is something is not firing, whether it's the manager, whether it's operations, whether it's the product. Something's not in alignment, and I want to get to that later in our call.
Okay, sure. Well, why don't you talk a little bit about, you know, what type of development efforts that you try to do or that you've seen work with top producers in the different companies that you've been at and then at your current company?
What we've found is that, and what you've said on your slides is so true, is, you know, top producers want to be involved. As much as a lot of us don't think they do, they want to be engaged. They want to work for a company where they feel that their voice is heard.
Mm-hmm.
We have multiple events annually where we bring our top producers in. We reinforce them with awards. You know, we have a vision from the company that we're constantly sharing with them. Top producers are moderators at a moderator table where they can share their wins amongst their peers. They're also given their awards amongst their peers. Then they feel that they're connected.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the other things we've done, you know, is just sending them a note, letting them know they're doing a great job. Overall, based on what you're saying, what we've seen is they have to buy into the vision. And vision has to have a set of priorities and alignment. And bottom line is, if they don't feel like they're a part of that, if they feel disconnected, I think a big problem a lot of us have at executive level or you know, divisional or regional or branch manager level is we take them for granted because they're so quiet. Sometimes our top producers put such beautiful packages together. They go through, you know, the system like a hot knife through butter. So we don't talk to them much. And we spend all our time with the bottom quartile. Bottlenecks our operations, and we spend all our time with them, and they see us giving our time to them rather than the top producer, and ignoring them. It causes a lot of angst. So again, that goes back into alignment. I would highly recommend reducing your bottom quartile. highly recommend saying stop working with that person that does 1 loan a month and trying to get them to 2 when you have somebody already doing 10 loans a month and you can get them to 20.
Well, you're right on, Phil. I mean, that's also what our research has shown. And when we looked at the competencies of the top managers, one of the things that we ended up seeing is the top managers will spend their time with their top performers. The individuals that are not good managers will spend their time with what we call C players. And reality is that can be a function of that the manager's intimidated by the top producer. The manager feels that, you know, they might ask for too much. I mean, there's somewhat of this issue of they're feeling that the top producer, if I really interface with that person a lot, they're going to be asking for more things. And so it really says more about the manager than the top producer. But certainly what I would tell you, and one of the things when, you know, we're doing training or consulting, that's the question we ask the manager: who do you spend your time with? And the managers that really need some development themselves are individuals that spend their time with the C players. The C players really need to follow a structured out process where you know, in other words, if certain events happen, and leaving the time for that manager to spend it with the top producers. But you're exactly right. The manager who says they don't, you know, that the top producer doesn't need any help, that's really a manager who doesn't understand how they're supposed to engage and retain them. Is that really, do you see that a lot yourself?
Oh, definitely. I think it's critical that the managers that we hire that oversee our top producers, all our producers, are relevant. What I mean by that is, you know, I'm not disparaging anyone in any age category. As you can see by my photo, I have gray hair.
Well, we all can say that.
I've been around a while.
Right.
But the point is that if you can have a branch manager or a regional manager that's been around 15, 20 years, they haven't been out in the field. Unless they're out in the field coaching, they're not relevant anymore. I would highly recommend when you hire managers that have been out in the field recently and know what's going on. The market's changed incredibly. Hire someone that's almost a mechanic, that when a loan officer calls in, they know what they're talking about and they go right to operations, get it resolved. I'm not asking for somebody in operations, but I'm asking for somebody that cares. I think you nailed it, and I love the line. I wish I would have coined this phrase. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Right. Right. Well, you raised, Phil, another great point, and that's certainly what I see. Many first-line managers very much involved with working the deal because there's some problem that's occurred on the loan file. And then really what's the issue? Because they were top producers possibly in the past and then got promoted, that's something they're comfortable with. But reality is that isn't their role. And when you start asking for individuals to be coachers, certainly what I would tell you is that there's a certain personality profile that fits to that. And so, you know, when they're working on loan files, that's something they're comfortable with. But to expect them now to coach, you're really asking them to make a big leap unless you're going to help them get better, which could be through a personal coach or a training effort. But are you seeing, again, when they start working on loan files as a manager, that's an early sign that there's some issue where they're not really that comfortable in the coaching side?
Oh, absolutely. You know, if we want to move into coaching, you know, I firmly believe that, you know, that they need to be mentoring their people. Let me stress that. They need to be coaching their people. I think a lot of times we take the word mentoring,
right,
and we misunderstand. Mentoring is you tell me a story and I'll tell you what you should have done.
Yeah.
Coaching is being there. Coaching is being on the sidelines, observing these people as they work, and
right,
working with them through it. Working at a distance, just taking a phone call, helping them put a loan through the system, that's operations. That's not leadership management.
Yeah, that's another point, and that's another reason why that manager is so critical position. And I think a lot of times in mortgage banking, from what I see at a variety of different companies, is that the manager is not really invested in from the standpoint that when the training dollars are being allocated, they typically aren't at the manager level. They're down at the loan officer level. And so when we're looking for these people who may not even really know how, no one's ever taught them how to actually manage. And is that kind of your experience too?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Sometimes in order to be a great coach, you have to have had one. Somebody had to have modeled that for you, whether it's your mother or father, whether
Right.
it's somebody that you've worked for in the past. And I would also say that, top producers, not only do they need a coach, I would say vice versa. The managers need a coach. I would highly recommend any top producers that are listening or any managers that are listening, get a coach. If you're high up in the food chain, maybe you get someone beneath you and ask them the question, how am I doing? Watch me for a while. They're not going to if I were to do that, if I were to walk out and ask two people within this organization to tell me how I'm doing, they're not going to feel good about that. They're not going to want to tell Phil how he's doing because for fear of whatever. But if you tell them honestly, look, I mean it sincerely, there'll be no retribution, I really want to know how I'm doing, you're going to get honest feedback. It might take 2 to 3 weeks of them observing you, and even before you go in to step in to make a mistake, or if you've made a mistake, they'll let you know right away that you've made a mistake.
Yeah, I think you're right on, and certainly one of the things that I've seen in companies and a lot of times there's where the 360 can be a brutal experience in a company, especially if the reality is, because you are getting that feedback, and often when I tell my clients, are you really ready for this feedback? And the second step is, if you are ready for it, then are you really ready to do something about it? Because there's no point in taking and installing 360s if it's just going to be some paper pushing event and nothing really happens afterwards. But certainly 360s and a lot of other companies in other industries have that as part of their development, personal development for the individual. We haven't seen it as much in mortgage banking, but I will say the companies are recognizing that they need to really open up their ears to what the employees are saying, and the 360 is a great way to do that for sure. So have you been involved with 360s yourself, or what has been your experience?
Oh, I have, and they're painful. Gosh. You're hearing from what your superior has to say about you. You're hearing from the people underneath you, what they have to say, and you're hearing about what your peers think about you, and it's all private. I like my suggestion a little better in that you can actually solicit feedback, honest feedback from somebody heart to heart. Use it. Because honestly, it's so simple. It's amazingly simple, but yet it's something none of us do, and that's solicit feedback. And I would also, without hesitancy, say that anybody out there listening that has ever had a superior ask you for advice, I'm curious, how do you feel about them? Do you think they're a weakling? Or do you think, wow, nobody's ever asked me this before. I would go over a cliff with this person.
Right. Yeah, that's a great point. Another great point, because we want that to happen to us. But many times, again, I don't think it's on purpose. What ends up happening, managers are very busy. Everybody wants reports. There's all kinds of initiatives. And then we never go through the process of, we know we need to do it, but we don't do it because of other time issues. But really what we're saying today, it should be your top priority, because that's what retains top producers. When they go through and leave and then they cite money, that is another sign that there was more to it. There was some event that happened that was a trigger event that now said to them, gee, we may not be a match anymore, so I'm now going to look around. So yeah, you're exactly right. You want to be listened to, and likewise, certainly the person that's leaving, that's typically the issue. That's a really good point, Phil, I have to say. You talked about the vision. Could you talk a little bit about this issue of how, sometimes with companies, and especially with what's going on in the industry today, visions change, and who you had with you may not be engaging in the new vision. Kind of talk about that, and how do you determine, someone that is kind of slipped out of the vision?
I don't know that anybody slips in or out of a vision. What I do know is that vision starts at the very top.
Mm-hmm.
We need to look as executives at, what are we great at? And where do we want to be? And not just in 3 months or 6 months or even a year. Down the road, 3 to 5 years from now, where do we see ourselves as a look back? Where do we see ourselves 5 years from now? So we're, hypothetically, we're great at government lending. We're great at jumbo lending. We're great at refinancing. We're great at purchasing. Okay, fine. Let's cast the vision that we want to be here. We want to have this many branches. We want to have you doing this kind of volume. And these are the type of people we're looking for, whether they're purchase people, refi people, government people, whether they're conventional people. Bottom line is you cast the vision. Now, what are the priorities? The priorities are maybe 3 to 5 things and no more that we must have. These are 3 to 5 things that we must do in order to achieve that vision, and we need to buy off on it. And what is that? I mentioned it earlier. Are we going to be the greatest government lender or the greatest jumbo lender? Are we going to be closing loans in X days or sooner? Will we maintain X a percentage of purchase or refinance business? And, our relationships internally or externally, and what I mean by that is internal is the people inside, or external, our realtors, builders, correspondent lenders. They're going to be our highest priority. Finally, you match everything up against it through alignment. Now, if you're interviewing people, say one of your priorities is you're going to be a purchase business king or queen. Great. But if you're interviewing people that came from refinance houses, you're out of alignment. If you're advertising, and let's just say you want to be the greatest government lender, and you're advertising jumbo, you're out of alignment.
Mm-hmm.
And so my point is we need to take a hard look at the vision. If there isn't a vision, corporation, if there isn't a vision that you can go to your loan officers and say, what's the company vision? I want you to write it down on a piece of paper. If they can't do that, you haven't communicated clearly the vision of the corporation. And if they don't know, their processors don't know, their underwriters don't know, and more importantly, their clients don't know.
Well, I feel that raises another great point on this issue of how do you check? I mean, from your own experience, would you call up a processor just to ask them that question, or how would you implement that in your own company?
Well, with me, I say it ad nauseum. I'm always walking around asking, where are we going to be, gang? Oh, we're going to be at $300 million in a year and a half in retail. Great. How are we going to do that? 60 branches at $5 million, Phil. Great. How many loan officers? 5 to 8 loan officers doing $1 million a piece, Phil. Great. I say it constantly.
Okay.
Are we going to be the greatest X lender? I'm saying it in operations meetings. I'm saying it in senior management meetings. I'm saying it in all the leadership meetings with the divisionals, the regionals, and the branch managers. But do I say it enough? I'll bet I still don't say it enough. I want to say it so much, people actually mock me. I want them to make fun of me. I want to hear somebody go, Phil the other day said, we're going to be at X million, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do it this way, and we're going to do it that. That's when people know they have the vision.
Right. No, that's a great point, a really great point. Well, what about the issue, okay, so you're repeating this vision, and then they don't seem engaged, or the issue is they don't seem to even have retained what the vision that you've been repeating has been about. What happens to those? I mean, do those people go into, you have a conversation with them, or how do they get addressed?
Well, I guess if we're talking about a loan officer that doesn't know the vision,
Sure.
then I would say, what's wrong with me first?
Mm-hmm.
At the very top of the house, did I not communicate it articulately?
Right.
Did it not go out to the divisionals? Did it not go out to the, when I had everyone in and I had every loan officer and account executive in, were they not listening? Were they out on their phone while I was talking? And then I would roll it downhill to the closest manager to them. Has the manager bought into the vision?
Right.
Does the manager know what the vision is? The thing I see a great deal of, Pat, is people just hiring bodies.
Right.
And to your point, that's the last thing you want to do. And it seems like as old as I get, I'm still telling people, are you sure that's the person you want to hire?
Mm-hmm.
Is that the person you want as your branch manager, that when they walk in here, you're proud of them, that they actually have the look and the feel of this organization, that they're going to hold people accountable, that they're actually going to recruit great people? Better yet, would anybody work for that person?
Right.
So yeah, it starts at the top, it rolls all the way down. And somebody asked a question, should you keep a top producer? Should you? Absolutely. They're so hard to find, and they're so expensive to find.
Right.
And once you do, you hang on to them pretty much at all costs, unless they're doing bad business and they're a cancer to the group. Otherwise, absolutely keep them.
Right. Well, I agree completely, again, with what you're saying. I mean, I would tell you, and certainly what our research says, and the better run companies are companies that have less people but better people, and that's an initiative that can't be driven by the branch. It has to be driven by the executives. And I think as we're going into this different market, it's going to require, just from an operational expense standpoint, that model be in place. So for those that have been thinking about their hiring issues, you really have to relook at, are you doing it the right way? A body match just to get an originator is a strategy that doesn't work and hasn't really worked for a long time. Phil, one last question, and all great points that you're making. If you had to give one takeaway for the people today that you've learned over all your years in mortgage banking when it comes to this issue of retaining top producers, what would that be? What could they implement right away?
Well, it's everything I've said, and don't ever take them for granted. Please don't take your top producers for granted. Spend time with them, call them, go out into the field with them.
Right.
Recognize them. Some of the really simple things that people don't understand is, don't lie to them. Tell them exactly what's going on. Tell them, I can't do this, and here's the reason why. They're human beings. They understand the logic. Nobody wants to work for a company or a person they can't trust. Mm-hmm. Somebody that won't support them and lacks integrity. Other than that, it's just the basics of blocking and tackling. Get out into the field with them. Go on their milk route with them. Show them what they're doing with their time. That's a whole other subject that I talk to my people about, is ranking their time. Ones and threes. Ones are priorities. Twos are, I can kind of do it, or three, I can just do that tomorrow or another day. A lot of people spend their time on twos and threes when they should be focusing on ones to increase their production. Most importantly, face-to-face, belly-to-belly. Tell me about yourself. Get to know you people. I mean, heck, I've interviewed people that after 45 minutes have said to me, man, you know more about me in 45 minutes than my previous manager that worked for me, that I worked for 5 years. That's a scary comment.
Right. So we've gotten one question from the group today, and they're asking about prima donnas and the famous, what to do about the prima donna and how to handle them where you're not being taken hostage. Could you kind of share your thoughts on that?
Wow, yeah, that's a tough one. I think we all have had some prima donnas. I think you have to evaluate how much time and effort you put into that prima donna, how much money is spent on that prima donna, and I think more importantly, I said it earlier, is that prima donna a cancer to the group? If they are not, and they are just taking time, your time, to deal with it. Because, and the other thing is, how much volume is that prima donna? Is it a prima donna that does $2 million a month, or is it a prima donna that does $20 million a month? I would take a lot of pain from a $20 million a month producer.
Mm-hmm.
A $2 million a month prima donna that might be negative in a branch, causing people to leave, causing others to not want to work there. Maybe you need to show them the door.
Yeah, that's a great point. And you really raised the issue about what is a top producer, and for sure, a $2 million producer, I really define as a good producer. But the top 20%, as I said in the beginning of this, are the ones that are doing almost 70% of your business. And likewise, when you actually look at the top 1%, what the research shows is that they roughly do 10% of your business. So it is a rarefied world, and a $1 million producer would not certainly be a top producer for sure. So, Phil, anything else? Otherwise, all great points. And Phil would love to connect with you on LinkedIn. So go to his LinkedIn, and any other questions that you might have for Phil, I'm sure he'd be glad to answer them for you.
Well, thank you, Pat. And one last item I would say about a prima donna, and I've done this before, is get them some help. A lot of times it's emotional. It's EQ, not always IQ.
Right.
And maybe they should hire you, Pat, to work with them because it might be cheaper in the long run.
Well, it's nice of you to say, Phil, and certainly I appreciate it. All great comments, and Phil, I certainly appreciate joining us today.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, it was great. For more information about sales topics, go to we have a weekly sales blog that I send out. Certainly sign up by going to the web page. Connect through LinkedIn. I know Phil would like you to do that, and I also would like that to happen. Have a great day, and thanks for joining our webinar.